Hello, welcome to MoCDA. I'll be calling Martin Lukas Ostachowski today, who's a Polish-born German geometric abstraction artist who currently lives and works in Quebec in Canada. In his recent works, Martin explores clouds within the blockchain context as a contemporary symbol of data storage and connectivity, representing transformation and hope for fair global distribution of opportunities and wealth. Through data visualizations, animations, digital and physical pieces, Martin aims to make this complex technology accessible in order to spark discussions on the blockchain's profound transformative potential for society. Enjoy the talk. Hey, Martin.
Hi, Serena. How are you?
Hey, all good. Thank you for connecting with me this evening. I guess it's lunchtime your side, is it?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I just had lunch indeed.
Nice, yeah. How are you?
Very good, despite all the circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
And yourself?
Yeah, not bad. Coping with the situation, but yes, it's been quite challenging lately. But yeah, this is actually quite good to be talking to you and talk about art. So
Yeah, it is, and it's. I think it's a great series right now. Having every day a little dose of art and talk about something else.
yeah, such a
Getting
learning.
to know,
Yeah.
getting to know new actors in the field, and
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a great concept.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, I just wanted to welcome everyone that is watching us live, and also saying that if you would like to share any question for us to discuss, please feel free to. We're gonna be talking about Martin's latest work and techniques and the blockchain and nature. But also, if you do have topics to discuss and questions, please feel free to share them with us. And yeah, just going through the conversation, I've been looking through your work, and I was quite interested about how you use natural ways. You use nature to sort of describe tech in a way. And I was very fascinated about your series you did with the clouds and how you got to tokenize those works. So I will put on the screen some of your work, maybe, and then we can talk about this series if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So I've got a few images here to share.
Okay, that's the Tokenized Cloud series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
How did it
so
start?
that started basically. I started taking photos on passenger flights, and I experimented a lot with like taking videos, taking photos, and at one stage I decided to try taking photographs like in intervals. So every X amounts of seconds, I would just take a shot, and if I timed it right, I would be able to basically create a panoramic view of the sky while flying in the plane, and that enabled a lot of different things. And one of the outcomes was the Cloud Sphere series, because I was looking into conveying the whole concept of using clouds as a symbol for a whole broad range of things. So it starts basically as a concept as we know it for like data and connectivity, but in mythology, a bright cloud can symbolize something divine, while dark clouds can at the same time mean doom and despair. So you have like a symbol which is very relatable, and you can, depending on the context, you can now put it into entirely different meanings. So if you, for instance, consider a cloud, as just something intangible, which is there, but you can't see it, you can reach through it. At the same time, it can be a barrier, it blocks you from the sun. And it really depends entirely on the concept of things. And having something like that was tremendously interesting because it gives you something which is relatable. Everybody has some sort of experience with clouds in one way or another. at the other hand, it is great for the symbolisms. And depending how you want to play it, you can use it to your advantage. And having something which is as flexible, which can be seen in so many different meanings in different cultures differently, allows you then to play. The Cloud Sphere series itself was seen in the context that I wanted. It's part of a whole exhibition concept, which was called Tropopause Contemplation, which was my solo exhibition, which I kind of wanted to introduce the general public to the blockchain concept without basically being intimidating. So I did that mostly by using exclusively physical art, and I used clouds as kind of like the overarching theme to create like this kind of connection. And in this solo exhibition, at one stage, I was discussing, okay, how about digital assets? How does it, what does it entail to become a token? And then when the tokenized cloud spheres came into play, where I kind of wanted to show there is like a cloud, which is intangible, and it's shaped like a coin or a token. So it can contain value, while at the same time, it's thin air if you want to, right? And then this is how the whole series came together. The interesting thing is that the most difficult part of it was really to time the photos. So depending on how high the plane is in distance to the clouds, your interval has to vary. Because if you do not keep the interval properly gauged, they will never connect.
So you have to, first of all, sit by the window, right?
Yes.
Have a good camera on you.
An iPhone does it too, but you just have to have like sufficiently
lighting.
Enough. Yes.
I suppose.
And
as so, I'm just curious on the making, side of the works, where you taking multiple pictures and then sort of assembling them together. And also, I understand that the round shape sort of resemble a coin shape, and so something that we tend to associate with value. But in a way, I see the clouds as, I remember from when we've met and you were explaining to me the symbol of the clouds and how these refers to blockchain. I also think that another layer of reading these works can also be that clouds, never really disappear, even if you have, clear sky. The humidity in the air, in the atmosphere, will create clouds eventually, and that will start a whole cycle. So to me, it feels like that blockchain, it's something that is immutable. It doesn't, it starts from somewhere, but it's part of a chain. So in a way, I feel that the cycle that is present in nature is also present in the blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel that nothing can be destroyed or created, but it's all part of a cycle. So I was quite fascinated about that.
Yeah. And, if once I transformed the cloud concept towards the blockchain, for me, it became really a symbol of hope, right? A symbol of hope for a lot of reasons, depending on who it is. It might be, the hope for a better future, for, a better distribution of wealth, opportunity. And depending on this hope, right, we have to see, then again, in the cloud context, how fragile that is, right? We see now the blockchain environment as like a possible or potential system to kind of fix a lot of problems which we have in our current society and world. But at the same time, the entire blockchain ecosystem relies in its existence on our hope and belief. Because the moment we no longer believe in the blockchain as a system, or like as a better alternative, people will start turning off their computer, which, at one point is the computers running and maintaining the blockchain. When people start losing their hope and turning off their computers, this whole cloud will basically disappear, or dissolve.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that through your works you wanted to sort of communicate that too, sort of incentivize people to approach blockchain not with fear, but actually as a way of um, promoting decentralization, but also new ways of economy?
Yeah, I think in general, I tend to like systems which don't claim to be the only solution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as it comes with blockchain, we claim, the decentralization aspect to it, which, if you really look at it, it's not entirely true for any blockchain. There's still
Mm-hmm.
some sort of elements to it, which are still centralized. It's
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it, all of the software on all the computers around the world is the same. So there are certain aspects to it which are by nature still not decentralized if you want to, right? So there has to be some sort of common sense or overarching agreement. And I don't know if I can get it back together in its entirety, but I think Vitalik Buterin wrote at one point that, you have like the architectural decentralization, which basically means we have computers located everywhere. We have the political decentralization, which I believe was that you have like an overarching agreement to what it is and what it's supposed to be, but you have the logical centralization that everybody basically runs and maintains the same chain and the
Mm-hmm.
same data on the same software.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that regard, it's not entirely decentralized at its core.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the fascinating part, because it's nothing. I think, if we would have the holy grail of answers, why wouldn't we be already using it? And the fact is, if you look, for instance, if you look at the animal kingdom, right,
Mm-hmm.
and you see like there is some positive effects of being like grouped together and making decisions in a cohesive form or in a group form, you will see that even once this group reaches a certain number, these benefits disappear. They actually shorten your life expectancy, or can lead to, entire groups being much faster eradicated and things like that. So, nature has a way of self-regulating itself, and I
Mm-hmm.
think as a system, I think the blockchain environments can give us many, many good and new inputs,
Mm-hmm.
but in its current shape or form, it's not necessarily there yet.
Yeah, I agree. There's a Leonora sharing a comment saying that pure decentralization is not possible based on human nature. What's
Right.
your take on that? Or, yes, and animal nature. I think, in a way, actually, I was curious to ask you and to ask everyone watching if you think that what's currently happening in the crypto art space, but also in the more broader digital art space, you feel that the way artists are now collaborating with each other in a way, sort of in support of promoting new technologies such as blockchain and sort of making people think that new ways of functioning as a society can be possible and can be extended to the way countries are managed, for example, or the way we function as human beings in communities. So do you think that what is happening in sort of artist collaboration, it can be taken on and expanded and taken into the more physical world in a way? Or is that a
Yeah.
good sign that humans are actually capable of collaborating with each other in that terms?
Um, I think it's definitely a good sign, and it definitely shows that, the nature at its core is good, and, people want to achieve together things, and see the benefits of being together. Um, the difficulty always arises when it reaches certain amounts, when it's not manageable as groups anymore. How do you then bring it to the next step? Well, you have like, if you look at a cohesive group of like 100, 200 people, it's fairly easy to reach and achieve some sort of decision making or ideas which kind of everybody can stand behind, right? But once you merge towards like a decision making mechanism which has to basically summarize the ideas or interests of a whole bigger group of people, to some extent, some even democratic elements, will not allow you to necessarily make the best decision for every individual anymore.
I mean, we've seen democracy sort of failing in this century, so we'll have to opt for something else or something more inclusive of technologies. And I'm also curious to extend this question to people watching and sort of share their opinion. I know that Eleonora also commented saying that you can tend to decentralization, but you cannot reach it. It's like happiness. So maybe it's more like a utopia, perhaps. But also Mattia is sort of saying that DAOs will be this co-op instrument, which it may as well be, but what's your opinion as an artist? What's your feeling about creating in this kind of context? And does your art in a way, is your art in a way informed about the current development of technology and the society, what's currently happening out there with COVID-19?
I mean, one thing is certain: nothing drives the digital transformation right now as being in a pandemic where entire institutions, companies, societies are forced to use technology, which they might have before had the option to opt out to or prefer, alternatives.
So you feel that the resistance now is sort of lessened?
I don't think you have right now a choice, right? If you look at, in an art context, right, like something like a gallery which existed only in the physical space, has now to struggle for its existence if it doesn't kind of remain its relevance by using the digital sphere. There might be only just a very few handful which succeed without. And the same the same applies for the general institutions as well. You see right now, at least in Canada, like the entire educational system shifting towards a digital transformation, allowing suddenly entire courses and subject being done online.
But do you think that is good enough, like having a whole class on Zoom and sort of interacting that way? I mean, I don't know. It's an open question. And I also wanted to share Domenico's comment saying that we need to practice it every day. I think, about decentralization and new ways of building communities around it. But it has to become a culture, which, yes, is true. It can only be reiterated and practiced if you are sort of breathing and living that culture.
I'm personally, in contrast to being a digital artist, I really believe in personal exchange. I can, and I think somebody mentioned it 2 days ago. It's the same piece of art can be experienced entirely differently depending on the context. So while digital art is great to be basically consumed at your living room, it's still not the same as if it's like in a framework of a gallery or for a museum.
Or if you see with your friends, for example, if you go to visit exhibitions with other human beings in a physical space.
Exactly. Share it, share your interpretation or impressions on it. So it's I don't think it can replace it. It will definitely push us towards it. It might change how a lot of things in our culture are currently done. Will the handshake remain after this pandemic? Are we remaining the same openness towards each other when we meet the first time in public space? will there be now people a lot more reserved than earlier? It's going to be interesting to see, because I think if you look at the dot-com bubble in 2000 and the real estate crisis, I think, crises like this drove to some extent what has become now kind of like the sharing economy. We had like a very high focus on owning and materialistic ideas, and it seemed to have shifted a bit after that, right? It's booming industries. We tend now to rent instead of to buy. How this will shift us towards digitalization, and B, as a society, that will be interesting to observe in the next upcoming years.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to let you know. I think the biggest danger right now I see is, not to forfeit our rights, right? Because as we try to get control, get a grasp of a global crisis, right? A lot of our human rights, liberties are right now restrained. You see, like, an opening of surveillance acts and some, a lot of things which people fought a long time for are currently...
Yeah, exactly. You can see, for example, the in South Korea, I think, is the sort of using apps to track people, and there's been a development of a number of apps that have been supporting communities in keeping track of the movement that this virus, for example, is having, and how it is behaving, sort of tracking the behavior of the virus. But in a sense, as you were saying, we've been fighting so hard to keep our data rights and protect them and keep, anonymous and all of that. And now we see that unless we surrender, our own data for the good of making fast progress on defeating the virus, we have very few resources left. So it is a question whether we're willing or not. But I don't know even if we have a choice. I don't know that if technology and the advancement that technology has had over the last decade allow us to sort of support against the privacy and the way technologies are used these days. It's an interesting question, and I think, in a way, art can definitely support on understanding it better and still holding to our creative mind and look at these things with a critic mind.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the subject, I think it is, in this case, it is one core ideas of my body of work was really to kind of bring people towards a technology which they feel entirely uninterested towards, right? Because we see only, if you look at the blockchain technology, we see it only in the media, really, if it hits certain like monetary values, or if it's sensationalized, right? So in my kind of view, it's technology with a huge potential, right? The potential to kind of transform or democratize or create opportunity. And while we keep focusing basically on just what we want to bring in the press, a whole development goes unnoticed for a lot of people until it might be already too late for them to kind of join the bandwagon. So that way, kind of, I created this whole body of work which would basically allow you to come into this space, get to know the core concepts of this technology, learn a little bit about what is it about. It's not just a currency. It's about it's about maybe empowering people. It's about offering access to financial means to people who wouldn't have it. it's, you know, it's maybe the immutable aspect is the most interesting for you, because, you know, you live in a country where there is no tamper-proof elections possible. So, you know, the whole idea is basically just to open one up to not using the stigma of Bitcoin being just a monetary value, but being basically a whole platform towards a new change. And I think to that extent, I would like my work at least to use this function as to document, you know, a technology which is in its infancy, which nobody knows where it might lead towards. You know, will we be talking in 5-10 years still about Bitcoin or Ethereum, or will it be, you know, replaced by something even better? We don't know. But it's certainly something, if we look at the bigger picture of things, which seems to be some sort of, you know, changing the paradigm. And it's up to us to use it, but we can only use it if we kind of are open towards it or understand it.
I wanted to share a comment by Ilan that he said, perhaps to emphasize how much of the global art world relies on the internet. Yes, I think, you know, nowadays with what is currently happening, of course, a lot of galleries and museums had to improvise, but also, you know, there were a lot of communities that were already using the internet as a tool of exhibiting. So I think it's now more than ever relevant to be familiar and understand and educate yourself through art on how these can be exhibited, and also, you know, learn. Also, Eleonora was, Ilan is also asking, he wants to understand the sky pieces. So I think we sort of talked about these already, but if there's anything you feel like you like to add on that, feel free to, Martin.
If Ilan is referring to the cloud spheres, yeah, we briefly touched on it. So it's the overarching theme is basically it was one element in the context of the whole exhibition when we came like to a definitions of values, and you know, this series kind of plays with the idea of the intangible aspects of clouds being here presented.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to remove somebody from this chat. Just doing that now. Sorry, I'm here.
All right. Yeah, so I don't know if Ilan, if he's still on, if it referred to this series or the other cloud series, because it's basically the whole theme of my body of work.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if Ilan is still connected, maybe he can ask another question about those. But then also, Eleonora was saying about why clouds and not something else, for example.
I had always a whole affinity to clouds. For me, you know, since the early beginning, I associated clouds always with some sort of travel. And in that concept, I always liked it, you know. I don't know who said it, but once you see the Earth from above, you see there's no borders, right? So I found it's fascinating. It's constantly changing, you know. It's like you're gonna never see the same cloud again. It's a metaphor of time, you know. It's very deep, and then really the beauty in it, it's, as I've mentioned before, it's so versatile, you know. Depending on the context, it can be positive, negative. It is always there, you know, and one aspect of it, you can't control it. You know, it's like, as much as you want to, you know, you will not decide if this cloud is going to stay or dissolve within the next few minutes, unless you use chemicals probably by playing. But I think overall, I just found that it had a high affinity to it, and I found also that people could relate to it. It's something, people associate cloud with, lying on a lawn and observing clouds with some sort of leisure or positive experience. So it served well for the purpose to make something which can be as intimidating as technology more approachable.
Mm-hmm. I think in a way it's, as you were describing this, it made me realize that clouds also give you a vision of the past and also on the future, because it's something that, as I was saying, it never really goes away. It belongs to this earth, to the planet, to the fact that we as human beings live under this atmosphere, and so it's sort of like keeping us into this bubble. And so in the clouds you can see the past, but you can also foresee the future. And in a way, it makes you think like a blockchain will think, would function, these blocks, these data storage on clouds and how they communicate with each other. And so the fact that you're never really looking at the same thing twice, clouds are constantly evolving. I think it is a good way of describing what blockchain does and how it behaves. So yeah, Ilan is still here. So Ilan, if you do have questions about the sky work, please do send them over. We've got Chloe coming with a question saying, is there a relationship between the natural world and technology in your work?
Yes, I would just, before I answer that question, I just wanted to add, in meteorology, clouds are also like a form of indicator, right? Depending on the patterns of the cloud, you're able to predict the weather conditions of the next upcoming, near foreseeable future. So I think that is also something which could be quite interesting. As to the question, the relationship between the natural world and technology, depends on the work you see. There's a lot of things reflected in it. There's one series of, for instance, woven pieces where they explore also a lot of physical phenomenons. For instance, the refraction of light, or basically elements and the physicality. Per se, there's what is might be interesting to know is there's always two components to the work. There is the whole physical body of work, which is predominant for me because at the current time, we don't have necessarily the opportunity to exhibit in the traditional art world digital only. So there is a lot of my works are focused on entirely physical pieces in order to overcome this shortage we have right now. And in doing that, there's a deep connection, between contrast in my work. I like basically mixing technology with traditional methods. So, for instance, in my woven pieces, I use laser cutting of paper, but at the same time, I weave my painting manual into the layers. So it's like always basically using the tools we have at hand, but at the same time, trying to capture the possibilities of the past and trying to create something new with the new inputs you have right now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I can see that, when I see through your art, I can make that connection. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to sort of touch on your latest work because I know Mattia is watching and he probably would ask about this work. But I was curious about this and how you got to create this one. So what we're looking at, can you give us a description of what we're looking at right now?
Yeah, this is basically a collection of studies. So it's basically an exploration of stamping right now. It all started with a collaboration I had here with a local artist. She's a mosaic artist, and we were teaming up for a group exhibition, which kind of had the idea that we're going to use my theme, which is basically, the overarching clouds and technology, and we're going to use her technique, which is the mosaic. However, I didn't want to necessarily start making a mosaic because she would do that already, right? So I was looking for a way to kind of convey the idea of a mosaic, because I kind of like, it's fractionalized, it's pixelated, so there is a lot of room to kind of use it towards it. And then I started stamping because it seemed to be a very, very lengthy process, and despite having a background in economy, I seem to be drawn to very long and tedious processes. And it turned out, it's been tremendously relaxing, and so it's kind of like a technique I explore right now. So what you see now is this, in the upper painting was a bigger format cloud. So currently I'm kind of varying with the grids, making it less of a checkboard, but using concentric shapes and offset shapes, kind of like, it is at this stage, I think, an intermediary state, because I still want to incorporate it in some sort or another within woven paintings. I think weaving is a big theme in my physical work, because it gives me the connection which I have with algorithms, because at its core, an algorithm is nothing else than a list of instructions which you have to follow to get a certain outcome. So if you have, for instance, a pattern which you want to have in fabrics, you have to always follow the rule sets. And if you look at weaving in particular, there's usually just up and down, or weave over or weave under, which you can then break it back to, like, a binary system. So I think what you're seeing now is the current exploration. Where it will bring me, I'm not sure yet, but it seems to be definitely a very fun and interesting process. And as I said, and I think that what interests Mattia as well, is I'm currently trying to break the grid towards new approaches.
That's super good. I like so much that you use your work, physical and digital, as a way of connecting the more ethereal world and technology into something that you can, materialize and appreciate and interact with. So I really like these dynamics of the movements that you create, and through the movement redefining the algorithms, for example, and how this works. Something that can be so complex, you can break it down and zoom in and identify patterns and understand it through. So it is really, really fascinating. Yeah, Mattia is also saying that he finds this technique to be like meditation, rubber stamping. And then, yeah, talking about breaking the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort
I think it's fascinating, because it gives you, the physical world gives you an entirely different tool set to describe just technology. There's one piece I made, which was basically visualizing encryption, right? And so what I did is I basically painted a piece of art, a cloudscape with geometric shapes, and then I cut this painting apart, and I used basically a rule set with a simplified algorithm to cut now these pieces into smaller slices, and then use a different rule set or algorithm to assemble long paper stripes, which I would weave. And the result, is basically you get an idea what it is, but you will never be able to retract the original painting unless you really know the algorithm. And in the exhibition, which was great for me because I had the chance to guide a lot of people really station by station and really explain the blockchain environment to the extent I wanted it. And I've learned a lot where, you know, there might be pieces missing in order to make certain connections, or where certain things work and where certain things doesn't. But the encryption piece, that really conveyed the idea because everybody could understand it once it's cut apart, you know, and that's basically what algorithms often do, right? They kind of compress or distort or manipulate the data. And that was a very manual way of showing that, which seemed to be relatable. So it's kind of,
I feel like
you
I
know,
want to see the work now.
I think it's on the website. It's,
On your website, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also wanted to touch upon the paper that you've contributed to about crypto art and the vision that you and I know Massimo Franceschetto also contributed to that. So I was curious to know about how you came up with your vision of what crypto art as a view on the future could be like and could support the current art community and economy.
So the position paper was called the Crypto Art: A Decentralized View, and we finalized it in June last year. It was at that time, I believe, one of the first times that crypto art was per se described in a kind of scholarly fashion. And it was a very organic approach to it, because in the beginning it was not necessarily meant in the shape that it started. I had chats with Massimo back then, and he basically showed me drafts, and I kind of added back my comments, and then it ended up that I became co-author, and then a couple of other artists joined, you know, among others, Hakatao created a section, then you know, two of the main crypto art galleries, Known Origin and Superrare, became part of it, and we had even a collector taking part, along with two art historians from BC. So it kind of was really describing crypto art from the perspective of really different players. So you had like the scientists on the one hand, which would kind of focus on, okay, what does crypto art offer regards to, you know, data science, the traceability, the availability of data, which is unprecedented. Then you had the art historians, which would bring perspectives and connecting, in a nutshell, or seeing parallels between concept art and crypto art, because at one point you can just see you embrace the idea of this token or value holder more than its actual materiality. So that was one of the ideas. And then you had, you know, the ideas of the galleries, which would try to see, okay, we are working towards a system which tries to be, you know, a fairer system for the artist, and kind of revolutionize a little bit the aspects to it. And last but not least, we had the artists and collectors, which basically, you know, described what it brought to them. And in my part, I kind of focused on that in the past, I used to work physically and digitally separately. And with my first years, and now, you know, this is almost 2 years now that I'm tokenizing art, it kind of changed my process to it. While I would finish a physical piece and think afterwards how I could digitalize it, now it's already part of my creation process. So it entirely changed the approach, and also guides already a little bit the thinking process and patterns. I think for me, if I were just to sum up a little bit the position on the paper, it was the one big part. It was the first time for me when I saw crypto art that it really offered some sort of marketplace for digital art. You know, before that, I knew like concepts like licensing and like, you know, there were digital art commissions, but they seemed to be very rare. And crypto art basically offered suddenly, you know, like marketplaces where it was entirely focused on digital art. And it seemed to be kind of revolutionary to me because, you know, especially, or at least at this stage, it still seems that a lot of people in crypto art are some sort of affiliated to like the graphic design world. You know, it's not necessarily entirely the fine artists which are in the sphere or space yet. So these people, you know, and I would count myself to it because I had a lot of overlap with with graphic designs too, you know, have now the opportunity to kind of breach out into the digital art space. And not only that, but they actually get now, you know, instant feedback. They have even the opportunity to capitalize on it and fund, you know, basically their artistic research. So it seems to me at that stage, it was kind of like groundbreaking, you know. And then having that, it's also a forum because, you know, where did you see digital art other than on social media without, you know, really having an opportunity to kind of focus on it, you know. So then we have crypto art, and with the whole blockchain environment and the conferences, suddenly a platform became there. You know, all these conferences started to show crypto art galleries and kind of creating or cultivating a new form of art collector, right? Who often grew up with video games or other digital assets or goods, and who could, you know, could relate to having an artwork which only exists digitally. So, and then in the last step, it was like, okay, it was like an entirely different to the community because I think Elon mentioned it too. You know, it's the first time you can basically talk in the same group with a gallerist and your collector, and these exchanges are extremely fascinating. You know, because you can talk more about the backgrounds, you talk more about your intentions. You know, you can explore, you can learn from each other, and it's unprecedented to me before.
Yeah, it sort of revolutionized the way we communicate to each other in terms of bringing in the same virtual room a collector, galleries to a museum, and an artist, and sort of understanding what's the gains for each other, and the benefits of applying this technology to the chain. I just wanted to share a couple of comments and then wanted to touch on something concluding. And so yes, we've got Matthias sort of saying that we are all trying to modify together the way we use these tokenizing platforms. And then Token Angel asking, which one is your favorite cloud? I've got my favorite cloud, I've already told you. But yes, I think on Matthias' point, in a way, I think these platforms, from my opinion, is that we are, in a way, influencing the trends. That's my vision on those. Yeah. What's yours, Martin?
Yeah, I think, you know, we are still in such an early phase that it can be all seen as an experiment. You know, it's really the initial steps where, as you said, you know, we've seen it was a collector-driven initiative, but it kind of implemented artist royalties now across many platforms. You know, so you see really that, you know, small initiatives can be very deciding or influential at this early stage because people are willing to adapt their ideas or models in order to accommodate what, you know, what the community kind of wants and demands. You know, there was a whole controversy related to that, which might leave out at that stage, not to kind of lose it, because there was, crypto Twitter has always its up and downs. But yeah, I mean, definitely we are still, things are not set in stone. We are still learning, and we see things popping up the first time, like people tokenizing the same artwork onto platforms and things like that. So we have to make the cases what happens in such a case. So there is no, black and white yet. We have to establish what we all think is the most reasonable thing to do together.
Yeah, totally agree on that.
And to answer just Token Angel's questions, I'm personally a big fan of cumulonimbus clouds. So that's typically like the big storm clouds. And
let me see. I've got these 3 here. I don't know if, or maybe you can show us on your screen. But
yeah, it's typically they're not in the cloud spheres. They're
they're not. Okay.
Yeah. Typically on a flight, whenever it gets bumpy, you're mostly, or like when it starts to get stormy, that's when I'm probably the only person in the plane who gets really excited, because that's usually the most fascinating cloud shapes. You have then these cloud towers, which the cumulonimbus are. And in the plane, you usually fly in the lower stratosphere or in the tropopause. So typically these towers and where you are right now, and it's kind of tremendously fascinating to kind of see that, because it's really like surreal landscapes. You feel like at times you're like in a Dali painting or something like that.
Yeah. And, I'm just looking through pictures of clouds, and just wanted to show the one that I am most fascinated about is the lenticular cloud. I don't know if it's the same that you were describing, but essentially it's a very shiny cloud that when you are, for example, gliding, it has this peculiarity that takes you meters up high, because it's sort of like making you jump, and sort of the pressure is really
the thermodynamics. It's a little bit of a different one.
But it looks a bit like those clouds. I will show you here. I just googled it. So the very shiny, very slim shapes. But yes, and from your work,
I think I hardly ever saw one in real life, though.
It's difficult. Yeah, they're quite rare. But for anyone that glides or flies like small airplanes, they're a blessing, because they can sort of allow you to travel even further. So they're my favorite.
I don't know if many people here know, but you have quite a experience in flying yourself.
Yes. I'm a big fan of clouds, actually. But yes, I'm mindful about the time. We've got a few minutes before the live will sort of end. So I just wanted to maybe address Chloe's question. She's asking, what do you think needs to happen, if anything, to bring more fine artists into the space? Do you think that graphic computer tech background is integral to having an interest in digital art? And she also does have a graphic design background.
I don't think it's necessarily a prerequisite right now. I think the environment is still not very accommodating. The whole onboarding process with, okay, if I want to create digital art or tokenize my art, because creating digital art is one thing, right? But if I want to participate right now in this crypto environment, I need a digital wallet. So first I have to understand what it is and what it means. Then I need, in most platforms, I need some sort of a minimum digital currency in order to fund the whole tokenization process. And I think these are like 2 barriers which are still extremely prohibitive to more traditional artists joining it. One thing which I currently explore in one piece, which I think is also very detrimental or crucial, is its volatility. I still haven't made up my mind on it, because I think the volatility is bringing on necessarily a lot of people which have no real interest in blockchain per se, but are just in for a quick buck. And on the other hand, you know, the volatility keeps a lot of people away. I started, I think, in 2018 on some of my group exhibitions to, instead of putting dollar values, like just a value in Bitcoin or Ethereum, and it created some interesting discussions with some other artists and visitors. But you know, if you would meet the same people later again, some of them would just tell you, "Oh, you know, Bitcoin tanked," and it's like, okay, you kind of didn't get the concept. What is it about? You know, it's like you're focusing only on one side, and I think that this is one area which I think is not necessarily beneficial to the environment. You know, if I have to explain to somebody that, you know, you're going to sell your art, but your art might fluctuate in value like 50% in a week, how do you address that? Do you have like, you know, do we need price locking mechanisms where you know, the value of your art follows or reacts to fluctuations? Or, you know, it's kind of, I think it's a huge component to artists to understand how their artwork was sold yesterday for $500 and today it's worth 100, right?
Yeah. It's,
So,
I think it's a good question to have and to challenge everyone who's on a platform, you know, crypto art platform, but also on more traditional galleries approaching digital work, and how this can be managed in a way that is good for both artists and the broader galleries and museums collections. But yes, I think also another good point that Matthias made is that installing MetaMask sort of tends to lose 99% of people adopting, you know, new ways of trading and sharing their work with their collectors. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of challenges, but in a way, education can definitely support the learning process, and of course there will need to be technologies and human efforts together to overcome the current state of things, which I think is already an improvement, because if we consider where we were at a year ago, 2 years ago, is a fast-growing market, but also community of people researching and learning from each other. So
yeah,
it's an effort that we'll have to undergo. You know, it's
yeah,
kind of like
we have
crossing a
to, we
bridge.
have to.
You know, if you know that what you have on the other side is worth, you will make that journey. But it could be tricky, it could be challenging, and you know. But yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think,
sorry.
yeah, I think, you know, the crypto art space is great, the community is great, but it is still its own kind of ecosystem. You know, there's not really new people coming in because the barriers to enter are just too high.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, it's important that we kind of eliminate these barriers and advocate digital art where we can, right? So that's why I'm excited for projects like MoCDA, right, where we kind of introduce also institutionals, you know, players in the field to the opportunity that, you know, there's a whole new thing out there, you know, which is, you know, relevant due to its nature and the time we are in. And it seems that, you know, the artwork seems to follow some herd tendencies. So unless the institutions are kind of part of the boat,
The movement, yeah.
a lot of
Well,
things might not happen before.
yeah, absolutely. We hope that we are contributing to those steps and making improvements as we go. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking part in this series, and thank you for sharing all your beautiful work and knowledge about blockchain and art. And I just wanted to conclude on a message that Token Angel left, saying that probably in the the current situation, looking at clouds, will give us a new point of view and maybe a new series for you, Martin.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Take good
Thanks a
care,
lot,
and we'll be looking through your work. Thank you so much. It's been great.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
everyone
care.
watching. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.